Welcome everyone to our 47th lecture in the series of exploring the foundations of religious Zionism. Start as always by thanking the Bellows family for their ongoing sponsorship of this lecture series and our partners, the Yeshiva University Torah Mitzion Kollel here in Chicago. As you, many people here, as I see the names, have been attending our lectures in the past, and as you are all too painfully aware, we haven't had lectures since March of 2020, and this being October of 2021, it's been a long time, but we hope to be able to get back. Obviously, today we're doing it by Zoom, but we hope to be able to get back to a shiurim in our building, in our center, in the not too distant future. We always start our shiurim by talking about wonderful things that have been going on. We've done a fairly decent amount of remodeling and building a security wall and a plaza in front of the building, and also parking lot renovations in the back. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll be turning our attention to doing some remodeling soon in the inside of the building. We thank everyone who's been involved with that. Then I want to acknowledge the presence of our president, Dr. Oren Laxer. We always start by saying the Tefillah L'Shlom HaMedina, so we're going to continue that tradition. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Sur Yisrael V'Go'alo, Berechet Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Kulasenu. Hagen Oleh Bevras Chastecha, Ofros Aleh Sukat Shlomecha, Ushalach Orachav Amitocha L'Roshel, Serev Yoatzeha, V'Sakaneim Beitzah Tava Milfanecha. Chazek is today Megine Eretz Kodshenu V'Anchilem Eloheinu Yeshua V'Ateres Nitzachon Ta'atrem V'Nasata Shalom Ba'oretz V'Simchas Shalom Liyoshvea V'Sachenu Kol Beis Yisrael V'Kodna B'Chol Artzos B'Zurihem V'Solichem Mehira Koma Mius L'Tzioni Recha V'Yushalayim Mishkan Shemecha Takasu B'Saras Moshe Avdecha Im Yeh Nidechecha B'Kitzer Shemayim Misham Yikabetzecha Adonai Lehecha U'Misham Yikachecha V'Viacha El Oretz Asher Yoshua V'Secha V'Rishta Yachedo Venu Le'aval Yirah Shemecha L'Ishmor Es Kol Divrei Soresecha L'Ofar B'Adar Gonu Zecha Kol Yoshvei Sevel Artzecha V'Yomar Kol Asher Neshama V'Apo Adonai El Hei Yisrael Melech U'Malchusol B'Kol Mashallah Amen Selah.
Amen.
Today we have the tremendous chus, the honor to be welcoming Rabbi Zev Shandalov, who will be speaking to us about Garinim, Torani'im, the Hamizrahi magazine, which just came out. It's online as well. And there's some articles about this topic, and Rabbi Shandalov is going to build on that and expand on that in greater detail. I don't think there's anybody here who doesn't know who this Rabbi Shandalov is, a native Chicagoan. After high school, where he attended Fassman Yeshiva High School. Didn't say that in his bio, but I just, made
because it wasn't that name yet at that point.
Oh, okay, fine. That's true. He attended Yeshiva Chalvim. Then he returned and graduated with a degree in business from Northeastern Illinois. Attended the Yeshiva Hebrew Theological College, where he received smicha and a BHL. He then spent 17 years of business and became, after that, the rabbi of Congregation Kehillas Jacob Beth Samuel in Chicago. And it would be appropriate for us to mention today our condolences to the family of Mrs. Rochelle Frank, whose Levaya was in Chicago last night, and her
here tomorrow afternoon.
Tomorrow, Monday in Eretz HaChaim Cemetery. Mrs. Frank was the Rebbitzin, together with her wonderful husband, Rabbi Jack Frank, and very strong life members and strong supporters of Mizrahi for many years. So we mourn her passing and extend our condolences to the family. Rabbi Shandalov served there in the Kehillas Jacob Beth Samuel until 2009, also taught in Hillel Torah for 6 years, and served for 3 years as the president of the CRC, was involved with Federation, the board of Yeshiva B'nai Akiva. I was in the Vadachino Chaveri Crown and of Henny Sachs, and he was on the executive board of the RCA, and was involved in many, many local and very wonderful enterprises. And then Chicago's loss became Israel's gain. He made Aliyah, began to work for the Torani'im educational experience, which specialized in tours. And in 2010, he returned to his roots as an educator and taught in Yeshiva Tichonit Ma'ale Adumim, where he lives. And for the past 6 years has taught at Amit Boys in Ma'ale Adumim. And he serves as a Rav in the community and lectures, gives shurim, teaches privately. He's married to Andy Sheichet and has Shandalov and has 3 daughters, 1 son-in-law, 2 granddaughters, and another son-in-law on the way.
2 weeks, Bezrat Hashem.
B'Shat Tova. He's expecting a son-in-law.
He's expecting a son-in-law, Bezrat Hashem.
Okay.
Good.
All right. And again, without any further ado, on the topic of Garinim Torani'im, it's my pleasure to introduce and hand the hosting over to Rabbi Zev Shandalov.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Eisenberg. Among the people you did not thank in your introduction was yourself. So I want to take that opportunity, besides just religious Zionists and why you call it Torah Mitzion and other institutions, religious Zionists, of course, to thank you very much. I know we've spoken much over the last few weeks, too much sometimes, just joking. And it really, sometimes a speaker says, oh, it's a pleasure to be here. It really is. It's nice to see everybody, even if it's just the names, to see the connection both between Chicago and some people here in Israel at the same time that are joining us this morning. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that today, still in Chicago and Chutz La'aretz, it's my father's second yahrzeit. It just ended here about a half hour ago. And it's hard to believe. Also, early days growing up in Chicago, Mizrahi was a huge part of our lives, and he's missed, I know, in the community and, of course, by the family. This morning, what I want to do, and I'm saying this morning because the majority of you are hearing this, it's morning time. This morning, what I really want to do is to look at a foundation, because the title of this series is Foundations of Religious Zionism. And when I get to the end, I'll make a comment about how this really is a true foundation. But let's just suffice it to say I'm going to do something a little different today. Most of the lectures that have been going on over the last number of years, and you can see on the website for the RCC, have focused very often on personalities. And to be honest, originally that was my intention. There was an individual lived in the 16th century who most people don't even speak about. And I talked originally to Rabbi Eisenberg about the topic, thought it was okay. And then he said, but I got a better topic, this concept of Garinim Torani'im, which we're going to discuss this evening. It is one of those topics that makes you very proud to be part of the Dati Le'umi world and the Mizrahi world, as you'll see through the presentation, why I'm saying that. Another thing I discussed with Rabbi Eisenberg early on is one of the biggest fears that a rabbi of a shul could have is to get up Shabbat morning to give it to our Torah. And it turns out it was in Chicago in Likutei Pshatim already, or here in Israel, it's in Torah Tidbits. So the fact that HaMizrahi magazine came out this past week, and I came into shul on Thursday or Friday, there's a stack of them with the whole topic of Garinim Torani'im. I already knew it was coming, of course, but to just sit and repeat everything that's in the article, that would have been a waste of time. I would have just sent you a link and said, Shalom Yisrael, and have a nice day. So obviously that's not what I'm going to do, not just to rehash only what's in the article, but I want to give you some more context and some history and some, I don't want to say the good, the bad, and the ugly, but the good, and things that have gone on here over the last many years, which have unfortunately changed the perspective of some people about the Garinim, and not in a good way, and how that has also come back again. So I know that's a little bit cryptic, so let's get to it. I want to go back to June of '67, which many of you listening, including myself, remember very clearly that Israel was in grave danger, both physically, spiritually, in every way. And we know that the miraculous events of 6 days took place, and Israel, the state of Israel, has never been the same since, both in terms of geography, in terms of just so many things. But once that euphoria of the war and the win wore off, many problems began to surface. And with problems come challenges. And as often the history of Israel, those challenges sometimes turn into some extremely beneficial long-term solutions. And so it was in the late 60s, right after the 6-Day War, about a year later, and the concept, the idea of a Garinim Torani was born. Now first, just let's translate the words. A Garin is a seed, Torani is Torah-based. So it's a Torah-based seed. The idea on the most basic level was to take like-minded people who come from the religious Zionist / Dati Le'umi type world and plant seeds in a couple of communities with the goal of both social change and religious change, growth, to give to the community. And I'm going to read to you a I don't say canned, but a statement that would maybe encapsulate the general idea. The main mission is to reflect social change in a neglected community through dugma ishit, or role models, enthusiasm, and Jewish values. The goal was to increase stability and social integration, as well as productivity and connection to Torah. Now, if you read that, it sounds like these Garinim Torani'im would be set up. And again, we're leaving it a little bit amorphous as to exactly what it was. A community, let's just leave it like that for a moment. It sounds like a bunch of people would go to a community, they'd set up shop, and they'd give shiurim in the community and have a nice day. That's what it would be. But it wasn't just about Torah. Torah obviously is the most important goal. Number one most important goal. But these Garinim went beyond that, because while that is a great goal to bring Torah to a community, it was obvious to many at that time, and we'll see why soon, that goal would not have been sufficient to succeed given the current infrastructure, which was not solid in many communities. In order to prepare for today, now I was aware of Garinim Torani'im already for quite a long time. We have one here in Ma'ale Adumim. As a matter of fact, years and years ago, when I was hearing about a Garinim Torani here in Ma'ale Adumim, I thought, okay, it just meant a bunch of people who were trying to buy some apartments in the same building. That's, just a bunch of religious people. That was my perspective was, excuse me. But I needed to do some more research. And the research led me to Rav Daron Perez, who the executive director of World Mizrahi, who then gave me a name of someone to contact. Now, we know that if you play Jewish geography, there's no such thing as 6 degrees of separation. In the Jewish world, is about 1 degree. So he gave me a name, and he says his name is Itai. The person he wanted me to speak to was Itai Friedlander. I said, okay, Friedlander isn't the most uncommon name, nor the most common. So when I got in touch with him, I said, let me ask you a question. Are you related to a guy named Talmon Friedlander? He said, yeah, he's my older brother. Turns out he's my next door neighbor, Talmon, and my daughter and son-in-law's landlord. So talk about a tiny little world. And he is and was a tremendous source of information for me today. I'll mention him at the end for other reasons. We'll see. And he is the Mazkir, the Secretary General of an institution called Hakeren Kilot B'Yisrael. Again, I'll explain what this is in a little while. And he himself has been in the Garinim Torani world for about 20 years. He will be part of a bigger discussion we will have at a different time. So I want to go back now a little bit in time. I want to go back to the the late 60s, and I'm going to go to the city of Yerucham. And it was there that one of the first, not the first, but one of the first Garinim Toranim was first born or established. There actually already was a Yeshivat Hesder in Yerucham, and it was built on the raison d'etre of this particular yeshiva was not just to be a standalone, we're going to sit and learn Torah and there's a community around us, but rather they were to be involved in community as well. That was part of their original plan when it was set up. And it was true with future Garinim Torani'im that initial groups were established in the periphery, not in major cities, but not in Yerushalayim and not in Tel Aviv yet. And the goal of Yerucham, as I said, was also to be social, to be chevrati. And what exactly did that mean? So it meant not just having a place for people to come to learn Torah, not just going out into the community and giving a lecture on Parshat Shavua, but it meant being involved in the community, and whether it was a chesed project, whether it was involved in helping the community build something in many different aspects. And as the Garinim Torani movement began to grow, Bigadol, in general terms, most had similar ideas and similar goals. But probably one of the biggest differences between the different Garinim has to do with their base of the Garinim. Let me explain. Most people assume, and when I say that, it's because I've actually talked to some people recently since I was asked to speak about the topic. Most people assume that Garinim Torani is basically a yeshiva or kollel in a neighborhood that does this, quote, outreach into the community. So for some, that is what it is. It is a base of a home base, a yeshiva, a kollel, not usually a school. And the gentlemen learning in the yeshiva and their families would be involved in the community. And that was the home base around which everything worked. However, in other communities, other Garinim, there was not a home base. It was made up of people who were like-minded. There was no kollel. There is no kollel. There is no yeshiva. But the members of a Garin banded together in a tight-knit community with the similar goals of a place that has a big home base of a yeshiva. And in some communities, the idea evolved from a, quote, plain yeshiva, just with no particular need or desire to involve themselves in community. And then eventually, Bogrima, the yeshiva, would return to the community. We're going to see an example of that in a little while. So just to kind of catch you up where we're holding here is that we started off with just the idea. There were 2 or 3 early on. And as the idea of a Garin Torani began to grow, so did the differences in approach of how to settle within a community. Sometimes with a home base. Sorry? Oh, okay. Sometimes with a home base and sometimes without a home base, such as a yeshiva or not a yeshiva. Unfortunately, before the Garin Torani movement was occurring, many communities, especially in the periphery, outside the major cities here in Israel, that had become successful in a Torah way, meaning that there was either yeshiva or there was an infrastructure, there was a base of Torah learning. In many cases, those Torah-based individuals, whether they became Rabbanim or whatever else, moved on after they became very, I don't say popular, let's just use the word popular in quotes, and left a lacuna, left a hole in the original periphery community. And in many cases, those communities were already depressed communities or different than a main major city like Yerushalayim. And it left the community wanting. We would call it, I guess, a bit of a brain drain. And what else eventually happened in those kind of communities is that the new talent they would attract sometimes would be maybe one tier lower. So it didn't necessarily grow in the Torah way. It didn't grow necessarily in a chevrati or social way. And then a change happened in many different communities. And I'm going to use Kiryat Gat as one of those examples. For those of you who know, I'm sure that Kiryat Gat is a partner 2000 through the Federation with Chicago to Israel Partnership 2000 program. I've been to Kiryat Gat actually a number of times. But what happened with Kiryat Gat, there were a number of boys who had lived there, grew up in the community, and then went on to various yeshivot. And in most cases, many of them went to Yeshivat HaKotel. And at some point, these guys got wind of this idea of Garin Torani, and they made a decision. They got together, there was no WhatsApp back then. They got together and they met, and they had this idea that it was time for them to get back to their own community, which meant that they decided to uproot wherever they were living after they were already Bogrim. They already finished yeshiva, they'd finished the army. It was time to settle down, and they decided they're going to go back to their very own home community of Kiryat Gat, settle in the community, and build a Garin Torani. That itself was a model for other communities where people decided after they had already finished their years of service, whether it was yeshiva, army, etc., to then return to their home communities in order to build them up with these Garinim Torani'im. There are what I would call, and I don't want to sound negative, so I'm going to say it, I'll try and say it in a more positive way. There are patches available for many communities, which are the concept of benot shirut. For women, a religious woman can decide to opt out of the army, and she can do at least 1 year, in some cases, many cases, 2 years of service to the country. It could be in a hospital, it could be an organization, and sometimes in working within a community. And there are many benot shirut, Baruch Hashem, who have given a tremendous amount to this country, one of which was my own daughter, Baruch Hashem, did a couple of years of service a number of years back, my youngest. And they help the communities they're in. The negative, again, in quotes, is that it's short term. It's a year, it's 2 years. They may have an ongoing program, but the turnover is automatic with after 1 year or sometimes 2 years. And in rare occasions, the benot shirut or maybe the one bat shirut will stay in the community, and because they like the community and it's a good shidduch. But for the most part, a community that didn't have the Garin Torani had this constant type of turnover when there was some help, and then they left. Now let's focus a little bit now back on this main mission, the Garin Torani, and on the way it worked within the communities. For the most part, none of the Garinim are 100% independent. Very rarely, there's about 120, I believe, around the country, maybe a little bit more. For the most part, you do not see a community where a Garin Torani popped up and it is 100% independent. They work under a certain umbrella organization. And today, as of now, majority work under an organization called Keren Kehilot Yisrael, which is Itai Friedlander. I mentioned his name before. And we're going to come back to this idea here. Another one is called Sha'alei Torah or Sha'alim, as well as through B'nai Akiva. And there were one or two that have gone by the wayside. Each umbrella organization has a different approach to how they deal with these Garinim. As an example, Kehilot, this Keren Kehilot Yisrael, works more of a bottom-up approach, meaning they don't mandate what the community should have. In some communities, in some organization or the umbrella organization, the organization decides who the Rosh Yeshiva is, who the Ramim or the teachers are going to be, in some cases, who's going to populate those buildings, and sometimes even ad kadei kach to what the programming might be in the community. That is the perspective of a small percentage of the umbrella organizations. And we're going to see why in a moment that Keren Kehilot Yisrael has taken upon themselves this different approach because of some history, which I'll mention. Early on, the funding for these Garinim came partially through the government and partially through donations. But for the most part, government only funded it when there were actual physical institutions such as a yeshiva or a kollel standing behind the organization. I mentioned that most communities have one or two Garinim. In the Tel Aviv, Yafo, Lod area, there are 7 at least, if not more. And as I say, here in Malay Adumim, we have one. Lod is also another good example of a community Garin Torani, not based around a yeshiva or a kollel. Now, there is a very popular, well-known yeshivat hesder there, but this is not the base of the Garin Torani in Lod, and we're going to come back to Lod. It's more of a chevrati Garin Torani, so it does both aspects without the central physical building of a yeshiva or a kollel. But why is it that an organization like this umbrella organization that has about 75% of the Garinim under its rubric, why is it that they have done it more of a, here, we're going to be here for guidance. We're not going to tell you who to hire. You need our help. We're here. We're going to help you with the funding. We're going to help you with the government. We're going to help be a liaison. And if you have questions, we're here. Why is it they did not work top down and command, whatever it was, what these Garinim were going to do? Because a little bit of a history. At the beginning, when the process first started, there were a few people who had this vision. Again, we're going back to right after the 6-Day War. One, Daniel Trapper, who the founder of Gesher Institute, among others, went to Rav Mordechai Eliyahu Zatzal and asked for his blessing for this project, which they got. And they founded an organization called Keren Moreshet. That would be the initial, original umbrella organization that would oversee these various newborn seeds. What they did, as I mentioned earlier, is they went to the government to get funding. They did their own fundraising. And again, they were the ones who would require the Garin to have a certain person as their Rosh Yeshiva, to have a certain person as their teachers. And what happened over time was a perfect storm. And the perfect storm was that this centralization came around the same time as things were moving on and growing as the Gerush, or the expulsion of Jews from Gush Katif. For a bit of time already before the whole topic of the expulsion of the Jews, there already were money problems of the Garin Torani'im that were happening. And about 2 weeks before the Gerush, before the Jews were thrown out of Gush Katif, the head of Keren Moreshet called all the Minahalim, all the people in charge of each of the different Garinim to Yerushalayim, all the Rosh Yeshiva and all the Minahalim, brought them into a room, and they were fired en masse. They basically said, go back, shut down, we're done. We can't fund it, we can't do it, we're done. We can't do this anymore. We didn't have the money. The people seem to be against us, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. There were other smaller organizations that were still running and still had some of these Garinim going, but the overall one was in financial crisis, and they let all their Rosh Yeshiva go. As a direct result of this was born this other organization, Keren Kehilot L'Yisrael, founded also by Rabbi Danny Trapper and Shai Tuval, who was the Mankala, the general manager. And they learned their lesson. They learned their lesson that if you try to force certain things onto individuals, onto organizations, things don't work out the way you want. So they didn't have the funding. They had the general mood of the country as they got closer to the Gerush, or the expulsion, the people being more and more against the Dati Lumi world and being against the expulsion. I'm talking about right here in Israel. So couple that with others, they decided to have a different approach. They took over some of the Garinim that were existing. They gave birth to new Garinim and had this bottom-up way of working directly with the organizations, with the different Garinim. But I want to mention 2 minutes or 3 minutes about the Gush Katif aspect, because it also plays a part in this. I don't think there's anyone listening to this now, or anyone who will hear this, unless they're pretty young, that doesn't recall the pain that this country went through, and not just the country, but Jews in general here and abroad, during the time period of the expulsion of the Jews from Gush Katif. We know today, and people who were against it, those people who were for throwing Jews out of their home, know today and admit today what we knew back then, which was it was a horrifically bad idea that only just served to create a platform for future terror attacks. As a result of this time period, of this crisis, it was a crisis of faith. It was a crisis of Torah. It was a crisis of this country being split apart. I was here, I didn't live here yet, but I was here a couple of times during this time period. I was here the week before the actual Gerush, and the noise in the street, the discussions in the street, I'm sure some of you were here either before, during, or after, and it was palpable. It was terrible. Names that were being called, the protests, as some of you may remember the day before the Gerush, when they had it was a couple days before, because it was right after Tisha B'Av, when they had this massive tefillah at the Kotel. It gave a tremendous crisis, and that added on to other things that were already going on in the country. As a result, many of those that were thrown out of Gaza, they were thrown out of Gush Katif area, established Garinim Torani'im in other areas of Yesha, which really isn't Yesha anymore, but Yehuda, Shimron, and Azaz. So it's not just Yesh. But there were ideological differesos between various Garinim, just like Jews in different neighborhoods and in different cities can be Sfaradim, they can be Ashkenazim, they can be whatever they might be, but they don't all have the same approach to something. So do the Garinim themselves, and their ideology was different. For example, whereas the Garinim Torani'im that first left Gush Katif towards one neighborhood may have been more into a mix of trying to bring Chilonim and Dati'im together, which was the goal in a number of communities. Those more in Hebron, Kiryat Arba, Bet El, were more right-wing, hardcore, and I use the term in quotes, where they were like, we know we have a specific community we're going to work with. But with this crisis, with this whole crisis of Gush Katif, what the Dati Lumi world saw here was that Amcha, the average guy in the street and woman in the street, was not with them. Was not with them because, as you may remember, the majority of people in Israel were for throwing the Jews out of the city, of the area. There was a term that was coined, and I believe it's in the article, as a result of this time period, called lehitnachel bilvavot, to settling within your heart. Now, I'm purposely not going to get into that topic because Bezrat Hashem, I hope at a later date there'll be a greater conversation with me and a couple other people will be able to do back once again that was going to expand on this. And you can look in the article to understand this topic a little bit more about the topic of lehitnachel bilvavot. But as a result of this schism or this split among the people between those who supported and those who were against the expulsion, Yesha had made some major changes in their advertising promotions. They wanted people who came to Israel and people who lived in Israel to know, where is Ariel? Where is Kedumim? Where is the Shomron? And where are these various cities in the Shomron and Yehuda? Because they couldn't take the chance of having another Gush Katif problem. They couldn't take another chance of the Amcha, the people on the street, being against the Dati Leumi world, because they saw that the Gush Katif area represented to many people what is the Dati Leumi world. And they felt that in order to strengthen that, they needed to put, wasn't me, more Garinim, Torani'im on the ground to show the average community what we as a Dati Leumi world stood for. And in many cases, they built a very strong bridge. I want to share with you a couple of brief videos to give you an idea. This is if you didn't see the very beautiful color ad that was made for this, this is it. Now we'll take a look first at a 1 or 2 minute video. It's in Hebrew with English subtitles of 2 different Garinim. One is in Lod.
משחר ההיסטוריה נחרתה העיר לוד כנקודה עיקשת על המפה. בכיבושי יהושע, בקרבות החשמונאים, היוותה העיר מרכז יהודי ותרבותי. לאחר חורבן הבית השני, רוב גדולי התנאים בחרו לגור בה בסביבתה, מהם רבן גמליאל, רבי אליעזר ורבי עקיבא, שלימדו אותנו על התחדשות, יציבות ורעות. לאחר דעיכת מרד בר כוכבא, עזבו אחרוני היהודים את העיר לוד, ולא שבו אליה עד לעת החדשה. עם קום המדינה, הפכה העיר למוקד של קליטת עלייה, אך בד בבד, מצבה החברתי והרוחני לא היה פשוט. בשנת תשנ"ו, 1996, הגענו ללוד. מספר משפחות צעירות, חדורות בתחושת שליחות עזה. יד ביד, יחד עם תושבי המקום, נתנו בסיס קהילתי חזק השולח ענפיו לכיוונים של עשייה חברתית משמעותית במגוון תחומים. יחד יצאנו לדרך, יחד נבנה את הקומה הבאה.
הגרעין התורני הגיע לפה ועשה כאן מהפכה משמעותית.
אני אוהבת אותם על ההתקדמות שלהם שקידמו לוד. אני מכירה אותה לוד משנת 63. עד עכשיו זה יש שיפור גדול.
לאט לאט התחברנו, והפכנו להיות משפחה אחת גדולה, מגוונת ושמחה
קהילה שמחבקת.
כשהתחילו להגיע לפה כוחות צעירים וחדשים וחברו לקהילות הקיימות כאן, לאט לאט האמון של התושבים חזר, הוקמו מוסדות חינוך ושכונות, ואנשים פתאום ראו שהמקום המדהים הזה במרכז הארץ יש לו עתיד.
יש לנו היום מערכת חינוך מדהימה, מהטובות שיש, גם לימודית, ערכית, תורנית, וגדל פה נוער פעיל, מעורב, אכפתי וערכי, שגם גאה לומר שהוא לודאי.
העשייה נמשכת, אבל הצרכים גם הם מרובים.
אנחנו צריכים לתת עוד בוס אחד גדול, ולאחר מכן העיר לוד תפרח ותמשיך להיות מה שהיא יכולה להיות, תממש את הפוטנציאל שלה, ואנחנו צריכים את העזרה שלכם לטובת זה. בהצלחה.
That wasn't meant to be a fundraiser, sorry. I was going to cut it off before that. What I do want to show you, I was going to show you one more for Herzliya to show you a difference. But I'm not going to do that now because in the interest of time, I want to share something else with you. I want to go back to Lod. First, something that many of you, I'm sure, remember from not that many months ago. Well, I want to show you a brief event, that's putting it nicely, of what happened in Lod, the rioting that took place. Remember that Lod is a mixed city, Jew and Arab. As a matter of fact, my youngest daughter, who's about to get married, Bezrat Hashem, lived in Yafo, right nearby. And her neighborhood also was a mixed neighborhood. I went to pick her up, and there's Jews and Arabs in the same building. It's not, when people, I love this, when people talk about the apartheid state. Just walk into a hospital, school, many neighborhoods. So in any event, let's not get into that topic, but just a picture of a little bit of this, and then we're going to see one more thing. I want to know, just shake your head. Can you hear this now?
דגל פלסטין, ברוך הדם. הנה דגל פלסטין. איזה יופי. מה זה משטרה?
גיל, תדווחו. די, תפסיקי להגל אותי.
מה שאתם רואים זה שהערבים פה, שעושים פה מה שהם רוצים, תלשו את הדגל של התחנת משטרה.
What they're saying here, for those who don't understand, is that the rioting this is just a microcosm. What happened was also very bad, and there were complaints that police either didn't show up or didn't do anything about it. Okay, but that's not the point I want to make here. First, you saw the rioting, correct? Yes. Now, what we want to do, the reason behind it. So first, we're going to take a look at our enemies. We're going to take a look. It's always good to know what your enemies are saying. Al Jazeera. We're going to literally watch 1 minute of Al Jazeera, if you can stomach it.
They came here.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Jews marked Arab houses in a red spray, so the ones who come from outside will recognize our houses and attack us.
When he says those who come from outside, as will become evident, but we're not listening to the whole tape, he's talking about those who came specifically to set up Garinim, Torani'im in their community.
ISIS did it, and the Nazis did it. And now they are doing it for us.
This is the city of Lid, or Lod, as it's been known since Israeli forces took control of it in 1948. It's one of just a handful of binational cities where Palestinians and Jewish Israelis live together. Residents here told us that right-wing Jewish settlers are moving into Arab-majority neighborhoods in a deliberate effort to dilute the population.
We want the Palestinians to say, this is our land, this is our country, this is our city.
In the aftermath of a violent crackdown, new levels of mistrust and generational trauma are haunting its victims. We're in Lid to find out how Palestinians are challenging Israel's de facto policy of divide and rule while demanding freedom from systemic oppression.
Okay. So, as you would expect, the blame that's based, that it's also going to talk about in this particular video about the rioting was, hey, what do you expect? You guys are coming into our place, our land, and you're bringing in these crazy, wild-eyed settlers, and what do you expect? We have to rebel against that. However, Pasuk tells us in Navi, that those who want to destroy you are going to come from among you. What does that mean? For those of you who ever saw the movie The Disputation, which is a reenactment of Pablo Cristiani, who this is supposed to be Pablo Cristiani, debating the Ramban. Pablo Cristiani was an apostate who was Jewish, who decided to go against the views of Torah and to use them against us through the church. Whether it's back then in the Middle Ages or today, majority of time you seem to find that those who are the most against what you're doing and harm you are the own Jews. Take a look at just 3 headlines, 3 different Jewish publications, and only one I think is obvious where it's from. The Garinim Torani threat, missionary ultranationalism. Next headline. Whoops, let me move you out of the way. In Lod, unrest, Arab fury against settler Jewish newcomers boils to the surface. I'll tell you, this is Times of Israel. And finally, move you out of the way again. Israeli religious extremists are driving Jewish Arab street violence. These are all from the Jewish press. I don't mean the Jewish press, capital J, capital P, the lowercase p. We have our own problems here of people blaming us for causing these riots. We have enough problems in this world that we don't need our own people going against us. However, what I want to do, I want to end at this point, but just mention a couple of things on a positive note. things, first of all, in Lod have come back to what we say more or less normal, more or less. But it's also very important to note that many leading rabbis, both in the United States and in Israel, along with world Mizrahi leader Rav Doron Perez, who I mentioned his name before, came here on a mission and went to Lod right in the aftermath, saw the shuls that were destroyed, the Sifrei Torah that were burned, Shalom Neda, and provided both emotional and financial support, pledging more for the future. And Mizrahi was in the forefront of that particular trip to Israel, and both from abroad and from here. I think it's important to note one more pasuk. Hazorim bedima v'rina yiktzou, that which is planted with tears will be harvested with joy. I think what we've seen here this evening, there this morning, that there have been many tears shed over the years, lives have been disrupted, different challenges for both the Garinim and the communities over the years, but a Garin, a seed planted as a single seed, grew to 2, and then to over 100 today and blossomed across the country, having affected many, many lives in a very positive way, both in terms of Torah, in terms of social aspects. This series that Rabbi Eisenberg has mentioned already a number of times and shows up on the promotional pieces is known as FRZ, or Foundations of Religious Zionism. And I think there cannot be a more appropriate title to use for this particular topic of the Garinim Torani'im, because these Garinim truly are not just a foundation, but a foundation built on another earlier foundation. For those who came before us, the great leaders that you've heard about over the last many years and will continue to hear about, and this foundation of the Garinim Torani'im built on that foundation will Bezrat Hashem give us a tremendous she'ifa, a tremendous desire to just grow and to seek better in our lives of both Torah and Chavrati through the Dati Lumi world, through Mizrahi. I want to again thank Rabbi Eisenberg, why you call it Torah Mitzion, the RZC, and if I left somebody out, please, Rabbi Eisenberg, please correct me and add any other names. And I also want to thank everybody for your attention. I am by no means an expert in the topic. If you have a couple of questions, I can answer them, but I will also say that hopefully, as I said earlier, there will hopefully be a broader discussion at some point on this topic, because it is one that is not well, by the way, it's not that it's not only well known in Chutz La'aretz. Even here in Israel, there are a lot of people within our own communities that are not aware of what this amazing series of institutions that we have in the country. I'll send it back to you, Rabbi Eisenberg.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zev. There was one name that was missing from your list, and that was Rabbi Zev Shandalov. We thank you very much for everything that, it's been always wonderful to work with you, as we've done on many projects over the years, and this one was certainly no exception. And I appreciate you giving us a tremendous overview, sort of like a follow-up to the article, and a prelude, hopefully, of a preview of what we're hoping to do in Mizrahi in the future in a somewhat wider and larger format with other people and so on. Just some ideas we're tossing around now.
Okay, so actually there's a suggestion that since the Herzliya video is about 2 minutes, I'll show that one if that's okay with y'all.
Okay, that's a great idea.
And you also see, by the way, one of the reasons I did Herzliya and Lod is they are obviously different types of cities. Herzliya is a much more, for those who don't know, much more modern, upscale, higher socioeconomic level than in Lod, but they have different audiences and different people that they would attract. So let's take a look at this.
יש פה כמה מאות עריריים. אותם אנשים נמצאים בתוך 4 קירות שלהם בלי שאף אחד יודע מה קורה איתם. גרעין התורני סייע לנו בצורה מאוד מאוד משמעותית ורחבה, וסיפק לכ-350-400 קשישים עריריים גם תרופות וגם מצרכי מזון.
זה לא קל, אני רוצה להגיד לך. כל חג הוא בא ומבקר אותי, ובחנוכה הוא בא עם הילדים.
אז יש לי פה הזדמנות להגיד הרבה תודה לגרעין התורני, שבאמת היו בשבילי יום ולילה בלי שעות. בתקופת הסגר זה פשוט הציל את המצב.
אני גדלתי בהרצליה, בבית שעדיין לא שמעו תורה ומצוות, שזה בדיוק העניין של יהודי, לא לברוח אלא לחזור לאיפה שהוא יצא. מה שאנחנו עושים פה זה בעיקר מארחים חבר'ה בשבתות, באים סטודנטים, חיילים בודדים.
אנשים צמאים ליהדות, אנשים צמאים לאיזה פינה חמה שלא תמיד אפשר לקבל. So we're here to serve really as a home away from home, specifically to international students. They come here to college at ITC, and they don't have family here in the country. They don't really know anyone in the country. And we're here to really provide that structure for them.
This is actually only our third year here, and Baruch Hashem, it's gone from about 40 students to 400 students.
דקה בשופר גדול, והעובדים מארץ אשור והנידחים מארץ מצרים.
זה כבר כמעט 4 שנים אני חושב שאנחנו לומדים פה עם הרב שלומי זקסון.
שומעים, כן? שלהתקדם, בעם ישראל להתקדם זה להיות שייך.
זה ממש משפיע בלב, וגם אני חושב שזה פותח את המחשבות.
וזה באמת נראה לי השיעור אהוב עליי, ממש אנחנו שמחים מאוד.
השנה האחרונה הייתה שנה מאתגרת לכולנו. ברוך השם, בזכותכם הצלחנו לקיים ולחזק את הפעילות בתורה, בחסד, בזהות יהודית, בקהילתיות. אנחנו צריכים אתכם היום איתנו כדי שנוכל להמשיך הלאה מכל הלב, בכל מצב.
Okay, so you see a little bit of a difference. You saw also different types of people. And just gonna say a little flavor. You can go on YouTube and just type in Garin Torani. Better do it in Hebrew, probably. You'll probably find it faster. If you're looking for other cities to see how they look, like I said, Yerushalayim is going to be different than it is in Lod, it is in Ramla, and it is different in Yerucham. Thank you very much, everybody, and to you who have shown up.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone who's joined us. And keep watching for the future programs of Mizrahi and future lectures such as this one. Call to.
Very good.
Close up.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Be well.